Ooh, these so long sentences. I don't really know where to stop. Uh,
Oh, it's impossible. It's only one. Oh, really?
really long sentence. Um, okay, so can you read the title and the first part?
A hunger artist, Franz Kafka. During these last decades, the interest in professional fasting has markedly diminished. It used to pay very well to stage such great performances under one's own management, but today that is quite impossible. We live in a different world now. At one time, the whole town looked lively interest in the hunger artist. From day to day of his fast, the excitement mounted. Everybody wanted to see him at least once a day. There were people who bought season tickets for the last few days and sat from morning till night in front of his small bird cage. Even in the night time there were visiting hours, when the whole effect was heightened by torch flares. On fine days the cage was set out in the open air, and then it was the children's special treat to see the hunger artist. From their elders he was often just a joke that happened to be in fashion, but the children stood open-mouthed, holding each other's hand for greater security, marvelling at him as he sat there pallid in black tights, with his ribs sticking out so prominently, not even on a seat but down among straw on the ground, something giving a concordous nod, answering question with a constrained smile, or perhaps stretching an arm through the bars so that one might feel how thin it was, and then again withdrawing deep into himself, paying no attention to anyone or anything, not even to the all-important striking of the clock that was the only piece of furniture in his cage, but merely staring into vacancy with half-shut eyes, now and then taking a sip from a tiny glass of water of moisten, oh, to moisten his lips.
Good. And so, yeah, try to see Kafka is kind of being funny in a really dark way, if that helps, because he's definitely got humor. It's just a dark humor. Let's look at Merely.
Merely
Courteous,
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 mhm,
courteous,
courteous,
courteous, and prominently.
prominently,
Good. Open-mouthed,
open-mouthed,
barred,
barred,
lively,
or lively,
performances,
performances,
decades.
decades. Mhm.
Really nice job with markedly. This is one of the few ed endings where we like doesn't really follow the rules. It's markedly. Right. And let's have Ksenia, can you read the next part? Also welcome to class AMP.
Okay. Besides casual onlookers, there were also relays of permanent watchers selected by the public, usually butchers, strangely enough, and it was a task toward the hunger artist day and night, 3 of them at a time, in case he should have some secret resource to nourishment. This was nothing but a formality, instigated to reassure the masses, for the initiates knew well enough that during his fast the artist would never in any circumstances, not even under forcible compulsion, swallow the smallest morsel of food. The honour of his profession forbade it, Not every watcher, of course, was capable of understanding this. There were often groups of night watchers who were very lax in carrying out their duties and deliberately huddled together in a retired corner to play cards with great absorption, obviously intending to give the hunger artist the chance of a little refreshment, which they supposed he would draw from some private hoard. Nothing annoyed the artist more than these watchers. They made him miserable. They made his fast seem unendurable. Sometimes he mastered his feebleness sufficiently so think during the watch for as long as he could keep going, to show them how unjust their suspicions were. But they were of little use. They only wondered at their cleverness in being able to feel his mouth, even while thinking.
Good. Huddled.
Huddled.
Carrying.
Carrying.
And recourse.
Recourse.
Questions, guys? Huddled. So if you huddle together, you like stick together, you get really tight into a group. So that's huddle, like penguins huddle together for warmth. And a hoard is like a stash, some secret like quantity of something that you keep hidden. So it's like a hidden stash. Hopefully that makes sense. Amp, again, welcome to class. Amp, can you read the next part? Amp, we can't hear you. No. Julieta, can you read the next part while Amp leaves and comes back?
Okay. I know. Much more of his taste were the watchers who sat close to the bars, who were not content with the dim night lighting of the hall, but focused him in the full glare of the electric pocket torch given them by the impresario. The harsh light did not trouble him at all. In any case, he could never sleep properly, and he could always drowse a little, whatever the light, at any hour, even when the hall was thronged with noisy onlookers. He was quite happy at the prospect of spending a sleepless night with such watchers. He was ready to exchange jokes with them, to tell them stories out of his nomadic life, anything at all to keep them awake, to demonstrate to them again that he had no eatables in his cage and that eatables no eatables in his cage, and that he was fasting as not one of them could fast. But his happiest moment was when the morning came and an enormous breakfast was brought for them, at his expense, on which they flung themselves with the keen appetite of a healthy man after a weary night of wakefulness. Of course, there were people who argued that this breakfast was an unfair attempt to bribe the watchers, but that was going rather too far, and when they were invited to take on a night's vigil without a breakfast, merely for the sake of the cruise, they made themselves scarce, as though they stuck stubbornly on their suspicions.
They made themselves scarce.
Scarce.
Although they stuck stubbornly to their suspicions. Okay. Other than that, it sounded really good. Questions here?
Scarce.
Scarce is like hard to find. So if you make yourself scarce, it's like very few of you. So I went in search of bees, but the bees that day made themselves scarce and they were very hard to find. I only found one bee. Does that make sense?
Yes. And thronged?
Like grouped. So if you throng, it's like you're with a ton of people, a lot of people in a crowd. Um, so yeah, it's like this idea of movement and like a lot of activity, a lot of people. Amp, can you speak now? Hmm. Amp, we still can't hear you. Try to leave and come back really quickly so we can give you the next part to read. Got nothing. Nope, 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 nope. All right. Ksenia, can you read the next part?
Such suspicions anyhow were necessary accompaniment to the profession of fasting. No one could possibly work the hunger artist continuously, day and night, and so on, and so no one could produce first-hand Franz Kafka. First-hand evidence that their fast had really been rigorous and continuous. Only the artist himself could know that. He was therefore bound to be their sole completely satisfied spectator on his own fast. Yet no other reasons he was never satisfied. It was not perhaps mere fasting that had brought him to such skeleton thinness that many people had regretfully to keep away from his exhibitions, because the sight of him was too much for them. Perhaps it was dissatisfaction with himself that had worn him down. For they alone knew what no one initiate knew, how easy it was to fast. It was the easiest thing in the world. He made no secret of this. Yet people didn't believe him. At best they set him down as modest. Most of them, however, thought he was out for publicity or else was some kind of cheating or found it easy to fast because he had discovered a way of making it easy, and then had the impudence to admit the fact more or less.
Good. What no other initiate?
Now was initiate,
Yeah, spectator
spectator,
and rigorous.
rigorous.
Good. Questions? All right. Amp, are you there? Weird. Nothing. We got nothing, Amp. I don't know what's going on.
Maybe mute yourself by microphone because it happened with me, so I just press the button on my microphone.
That might be it. Or maybe you could try to restart your computer. I don't know. Sorry. Uh, now, Julieta? All right. So yeah, Julieta, can you read oof, the next part?
Okay, but I think there is a noise, so probably it's the mic. Sorry, he had
Mm-hmm.
to put up with all that, and in the course of time had got used to it. But his inner dissatisfaction always rankled, and never yet, after any term of fasting, this must be granted to his credit, had he left the cage of his own free will. The longest period of fasting was fixed by his impresario of 40 days. At 40 days, beyond that term he was not allowed to go, not even in great cities, and there was good reason for it, too. Experience had proven that for about 40 days the interest of the public could be stimulated by a steadily increasing pressure of advertisement. But after that the town began to lose interest. Sympathetic support began notably to fall off. There were of course local variations between one town and another, or one country and another, but as a general rule 40 days marked the limit. So on the 40th day the flower bedecked
The flower bedecked. So it's like flower strewn. There's like lots of flowers all over it. It's bedecked.
Flower-bedecked cage was opened. Enthusiastic spectators filled the hall. A military band played. Two doctors entered the cage to measure the results of the fast, which were announced through a megaphone. And finally, two young ladies appeared, blissful at having been selected for the honor to help the hunger artist down the few steps leading to a small table on which was spread a carefully chosen invalid repast.
Yeah. Okay. Let's look at spectators.
Spectators.
Okay. And yeah. Invalid. Invalid. Good. Ksenia, can you read the next part?
And at this very moment the artist always turned stubborn. True, he would entrust his bony arms to the outstretched helping hands of the ladies bending over him, but stand up he would not. Why stop fasting at this particular moment after 40 days of it? He had held out for a long time, an unlimitably long time. Why stop now, when he was in his best fasting form, or rather not yet quite in his best fasting form? Why should he be cheated of the fame he would get for fasting longer, for being not only the record hunger artist of all time, which presumably he was already, but for beating his own record by a performance beyond human imagination, since he felt that there were no limits to his capacity for fasting? His public pretending to admire him so much, why should it have too little patience with him? If he could endure fasting longer, why shouldn't the public endure it? Besides, he was tired. He was comfortable sitting in the straw, and now he was supposed to lift himself to his full height and go down to a meal the very thought of which gave him a nausea that only the presence of the ladies kept him from betraying, and even that with an effort. And he looked up into the eyes of the ladies, who were apparently so friendly and in reality so cruel, and shook his hand, which fell too heavy on its strangler's neck. But then there happened again what always happened.
Good. Oh man, this story. Any questions so far?
Yes, in the previous
Mm-hmm.
paragraph,
Mm-hmm.
was spread carefully chosen invalid repast.
Repast. It's like his rest. His invalid is like a sick person, somebody who's not quite well. So he was, yeah, laid down to rest, in order like to get better and eat after having eaten. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like a repast is just like a rest. Um,
Can you hear
okay.
me now?
Woohoo! Yeah. Alright.
Finally.
I am. Can you read the next part?
Okay. The impresario came forward without a word, for the band made speech impossible, lifted his arms in the air above the artist, as if inviting heaven to look down upon this creature here in the straw, the suffering martyr, which indeed he was, although in quite another sense, rasped him around the emaciated waist, emaciated
Good.
with exaggerated caution, so that the frail condition he was in might be appreciated, and committed him to the care of the blenching ladies, not without secretly giving him a shaking so that his legs and body tottered and swayed. The artist now submitted completely, his head lolled on his breast, and as if it had landed there by chance. His body was hollowed out, his legs in span of self-preservation clung close to each other at the knees, yet scraped on the ground as if it were not really solid ground, as if they were only trying to find solid ground, and the whole weight of his body, featherweight after all, relapsed onto one of the lady who, looking around for help and panting a little in this post of honor, was not at all what she had expected it to be. First stretched her neck as far as she could to keep her face at least free from contact with the artist. Then, finding this impossible, and her more fortunate companion not coming to her aid, but merely holding extended in her own trembling hand the little bunch of knuckle bones that was the artist's, to the great delight of the spectators, burst into tears, and had to be replaced by an attendant who had long been stationed in uh, readiness.
Good. Scraped?
Scraped.
Yeah. Spasm?
Spasm.
Yeah. Okay. And questions here, guys? Okay, so swayed is when you like move back and forth and you can't like stand up straight, you're kind of swaying. So when you're drunk, you sway, and if you're really weak or sick, you also can sway when you're like standing. Um, Blenching is when you like turn white and like pale and like, oh my God. And so one of these pretty ladies who's supposed to help the hunger artist out, he like falls on her and she's like forced to help him down the stairs, and so she's like freaking out, and the other one is like almost unable to even hold his hand, and so she also freaks out, um, can't like touch this skinny little bag of bones, and she is replaced by an attendant. Um, yeah, and then she bursts into tears. And lolled. It's like if it rolls around. So if your head is lolling, it's like rolling around. You're not able to keep it straight. Hopefully that makes sense. Any other questions? Okay. I think, is it Julieta or Ksenia?
It's Julietta's turn.
Julieta, can you read the next part?
Then
Whoa.
came the food. Whoops.
Go ahead.
Then came the food, a little which the impresario managed to get between the artist's lips, while he sat in a kind of half-fainting trance to the accompaniment of a cheerful pattern designed to distract the public's attention from the artist's condition. After that a toast was drunk to the public, supposedly prompted by a whisper from the artist in the impresario's ear. The band confirmed it with a mighty flourish. The spectators melted away, and no one had any cause to be dissatisfied with the proceedings, no one except the hunger artist himself. He only, as always, so he lived for many years, with small regular intervals of recuperation in visible glory, honored by the world, yet in spite of that, troubled in spirit, and all the more troubled because no one would take his trouble seriously. What comfort could he possibly need? What more could he possibly wish for? And if some good-natured person, feeling sorry for him, tried to console him by pointing out that his melancholy was probably caused by fasting, it could happen, especially when he had been fasting for some time, then that he reached with an outburst of fury, and to the general alarm began to shake the bars of his cage like a wild animal.
Okay, reacted.
Reacted,
Honored.
honored, Honored.
Yeah. So we don't really pronounce the H there. Recuperation.
Recuperation.
Good. Perfect. Okay. Any questions here? Okay. Ksenia, can you read the next part?
Yes, the impresario had the way of punishing these outbreaks, which he rather enjoyed putting into operation. He would apologize for publicity for the artist's behavior, which is only to be excused. He admitted because of the irritability caused by fasting, a condition hardly to be understood by well-fed people. Then, by natural transition, he went on to mention the artist's equally incomprehensible boast that he could fast for much longer than he was doing. He praised the high ambition, the goodwill, the great self-denial undoubtedly implicit in such a statement, and then quite simply countered it by bringing out photographs, which were also on sale to the public, showing the artist on the 40th day of the fast lying in bed almost dead from ex- oh my god, exhaustion.
Exhaustion.
Exhaustion. His prevention per perversion perversion. Oh my, I can't read this.
Perversion.
This perversion of the truth, familiar to the artist though it was, always unnerved him afresh and proved too much for him. He was a consequence of the premature ending of his fast, was represented as a cause of it. To fight against the lack of understanding, against the whole world of non-understanding was impossible.
Okay. Undoubtedly.
Undoubtedly,
And publicly.
publicly. Mhm.
Good. Okay. And so, questions here? This part is a little bit tricky. So the idea is that the hunger artist wants to fast for longer. He gets irritated like when people talk badly about the fasting, when they say that like maybe that's why he feels melancholy, when why he really feels melancholy is that they don't let him fast for longer. So what he wants to do is not eat for longer. He's saying that like he's lying in bed dead from exhaustion because they took him out, not because he didn't eat for 40 days, you know. So that's where he's saying the consequence of the premature ending was what the fat of his fast was presented as the cause of his like tiredness, when really his tiredness was, you know, because they ended his fast too early. Hopefully that makes sense. Amp, can you read the next part?
Time and again, in good faith, he stood by the bars listening to the impresario. But as soon as the photograph appeared, he always let go and sank with a groan back onto his straw. And then, and the reassured public could once more come close and gaze at him. A few years later, when the witnesses of such scenes called them to mind, they often failed to understand themselves at all. For meanwhile, the aforementioned change in public interest had set in. It seemed to happen almost overnight. There may have been profound causes for it, but who was going to bother about that? At any rate, the pampered hunger artist suddenly found himself deserted on fine day by the amusement seekers, who went streaming past him to other more favored attractions. For the last time, the impresario hurried him over half Europe to discover whether the old interest might still survive. Here and there, all in vain, everywhere as if by secret by secret agreement, a positive revulsion from professional fasting was in evidence.
Good. Okay. Pampered is like well taken care of. Um, so kind of like spoiled almost. So you pamper your pets, pamper your dogs, like well pampered. It's just like well taken care of. Um, okay. So people are not interested in hunger artists anymore. Uh, Giulietta, can you read the next part?
Of course, it could not really have sprung up so suddenly as all that, and many premonitory symptoms which had not been sufficiently remarked or suppressed during the rush and glitter of success now came retrospectively to mind. But it was now too late to take any countermeasures. Fasting would surely come into fashion again at some future date, yet that was no comfort for those living in the present. What, then, was a hunger artist to do? He had been applauded for thousands in his time, and could hardly come down to showing himself in a street booth at village fairs, and as for adopting another profession, he was not only too old for that, but too fanatically devoted to fasting. So he took leave of the impresario, his partner in an unparalleled career, and hired himself to a large circus in order to spare his own feeling, and avoided reading the conditions of his contract.
Oh, yeah. He had been applauded by thousands.
5
Then we're looking at premonitory.
premonitory.
Questions, guys?
Hmm.
Okay. Poor guy. Ksenia, can you read the next part?
A large circus with its enormous traffic in replacing and recruiting men, animals, and apparatus can
Mm-hmm.
always find a use for people at any time, even for the hunger artist, provided of course that he does not ask too much. And in this particular case, anyhow, it was not only the artist who was taken on, but his famous and long-known name as well. Indeed, considering their peculiar
Pec-
nature, peculiar,
Good. Peculiar.
peculiar, peculiar nature of his performance, which was not impaired by evidencing age, it could not be objected that here was an artist past his prime, no longer at the height of his professional skill, seeking a refuge or in some quiet corner of a circus. In the contrary, the hunger artist averred that he could fast as well as ever, which was entirely credible. He even
Alleged.
alleged alleged that if he were allowed to fast as he liked, and this was at once promised him without more ado, and could astound the world by establishing a record never ever achieved. A statement that certainly provoked a smile among the other professionals, since it left out of account the change in public opinion, which the hunger artist in his zeal conveniently forgot.
Okay. Um, let's look at refuge.
Refuge?
Good. So the hunger artist is in the circus now, and he's saying, I can astound the world by establishing a record never yet achieved. And then the other professionals kind of smiled and are like, nobody cares about you. But they still hired him. So he's in the circus, and he says he can still do it. Any other questions?
Apparatus, it's a bag?
Pardon?
Oh my, no, bag. It's an insect apparatus, so what does it mean? No?
An
Is there a
insect?
first line? Is the first
An
line up
apparatus. Sorry,
apparatus?
apparatus.
Yes.
An apparatus, it's like a machine kind of.
Oh,
So something that works, something that moves. So the circus is an apparatus, kind of. Um, yeah, an apparatus is like a thing that moves around. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. I think we're with Amp. Can you read the next part?
He had not, however, actually lost his sense of the real situation and took it as a matter of course that he and his cage should be stationed, not in the middle of the ring as an attraction, but outside near the animal cages, on a site that was after all easily accessible. Large and gaily painted placards made a frame for the cage and announced what was to be inside it. When the public came thronging out in the intervals to see the animals, they could hardly avoid passing the hunger artist's cage and stopping there for a moment. Perhaps they might even have stayed longer, had not those pressing behind them behind in the narrow gangway, who did not understand why they should be held up on their way towards the excitements of the menagerie, made it impossible for anyone to stand gazing for any length of time. And that was the reason why the hunger artist, who had, of course, been looking forward to these visiting hours as the main achievement of his life, began to shrink from them.
Okay, the menagerie.
Menagerie,
Menagerie.
menagerie.
Good. It's like a zoo, like a place for animals where animals are shown. The placards,
Placards.
which is like signs.
Okay.
Gaily is happily, like, yeah. And yeah, so people can't really stop because people behind them are pushing forward to go to see the animals. And so he wants people to like stop and look at him, but they don't anymore. Any other questions here? A gangway is like a walkway. It's like a path, kind of. Okay. And Julieta, can you read the next part?
At first, he could hardly wait for the intervals. It was exhilarating to watch the crowds come streaming his way, until only too soon, not even the most obstinate self-deception, clung to almost consciously, could hold out against the fact. The conviction was borne in upon him that these people, most of them, to judge from their actions, again and again, without exception, were all on their way to the menagerie. And the first sight of them from a distance remained the best. For when they reached his cage, he was at once deafened, mm,
And
deafened
like made to
by
not be
the
able to hear.
deafened, by the storm of shouting and abuse that arose from the two contending factions, which renewed themselves continuously. Of those who wanted to stop and stare at him, he soon began to dislike them more than the others, not out of real interest, but only out of obstinate self-assertiveness, and those who wanted to go straight on to the animals. When the first great rush was past, the struggles came along, and these, whom nothing could have prevented from stopping to look at him as long as they had breath, raced past with long strides, hardly even glancing at him, in their haste to get to the menagerie in time.
Menagerie.
Menagerie.
Their haste.
Haste.
Stragglers.
Stranglers.
And deafened you got, and menagerie you got. Okay. So the only people who actually want to stop to see him only really want to stop to see him so they can like annoy the rest of the people who want to go on straight to the animals. So they're like just being stubborn to like assert themselves that they can stop if they want to. Um, yeah. Anyways, any questions here? Okay. And Ksenia, can you read the next part?
And all too rarely did it happen that he had a stroke of luck, when some father of a family fetched up before him with his children, pointed a finger at the hunger artist, and explained at length what the phenomenon meant, telling stories of early years when he himself was watched similar but much more thrilling performances, and the children still rather uncomprehending, since neither inside or outside school and they being sufficiently prepared for the lesson. What did they care about fasting? Yet showed by the brightness of the intent eyes, and new and better times might be coming. Perhaps, said the hunger artist to himself many a time, things would be a little better if his cage were set not quite too near the menagerie. That made it too easy for people to make the choice, to say nothing of what he suffered from the stench of the menagerie, the animals' restlessness by night, the carrying past of raw lumps of flesh for the beasts of prey, the roaring of feeding times depressing him continually.
Good. Let's look at menagerie.
Menagerie.
Good. And he himself had watched similar but more. I think you just.
If had watched
Mhm.
similar but more.
And meant.
Meant. Mhm.
Good.
Meant.
Okay. Questions, guys? Okay. And let's have Amp. Can you read the next part?
But he did not dare to lodge a complaint with the management. After all, he had the animals to thank for the troops of people who passed his cage, among whom there might always be one here and there to take an interest in him, and who could tell where they might seclude him, and he called attention to his existence, and thereby the fact that, strictly speaking, he was only an impediment on the way to the menagerie. A small impediment, to be sure, one that grew steadily less. People grew familiar with the strange idea that they could be expected, in times like these, to take an interest in hunger artists, and with this familiarity, the verdict went out against him. He might fast as much as he could, and he did so, and nothing could save him now. Um, People pass him by. Just try to explain to anyone the art of fasting. Anyone who has no feeling for it cannot be made to understand it.
Good. Verdict.
Verdict.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Okay. And Julieta, can you read the next part?
The fine placards grew dirty and illegible. They were torn down. The little notice board showing the number of fast days achieved, oh, which at first was changed carefully every day, had long stayed at the same figure. For after the first few weeks, even this small task seemed pointless to the staff, and so the artist simply fasted on and on, as he had once dreamed of doing, and it was no trouble to him just as he had always foretold, but no one counted the days. No one, not even the artist himself, knew what records he was already breaking, and his heart became heavy. And when once in a while some leisurely passer-by stopped, made merry over the old figure on the board, and spoke of
Swindling.
swindling. That was in its way the stupidest lie ever invented by indifference and inborn malice, since it was not the hunger artist who was cheating. He was working honestly, but the world was cheating him of his reward. Many more days went by, however, and that too came to an end.
Oh, good. Let's look at swindling.
Swindling.
Good. It's like cheating. Also, honestly, we don't pronounce the H honestly.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for hunger artist? Okay. And let's have Ksenia. Can you read the next part?
An overseer's eye fell off the cage one day, and he asked the attendants why his perfectly good cage should be left standing there unused, with dirty straw inside it. Nobody knew until one man, helped out by the notice board, remembered about the hunger artist. They poked into the straw with sticks and found him in it. "Are you still fasting?" asked the overseer. "When on earth do you mean to stop?" "Forgive me, everybody," whispered the hunger artist. Only the overseer, who had his ear to the bars, understood him. "Of course," said the overseer, and tapped his forehead with a finger to let the attendants know that know what state the man was in. "We forgive you." "I always wanted you to admire my fasting," said the hunger artist. "We do admire it," said the overseer affably. "But you shouldn't admire it," said the hunger artist. "Well, then, we don't admire it," said the overseer. "But why shouldn't we admire it?" "Because I have to fast. I can't help it," said the hunger artist. "What a fellow you are," said the overseer. "And why can't you help it?"
Aw, yeah. Affably.
Affably.
It's like happily. The overseer.
Overseer.
Good. Um, so he tapped his forehead with his finger to let the attendants know what state the man was in. He's like calling him crazy. Yeah. All right. And let's have, who do we have? Am, can you read the next part?
Because, said the hunger artist, lifting his head a little and speaking with his lips pursed, as if for a kiss, right into the overseer's ear, so that no syllable might be lost. "Because I couldn't find the food I liked. If I had found it, believe me, I should have made no fuss and stuffed myself like you or anyone else." These were his last words, but in his dimming eyes remained the firm thought, no longer proud persuasion, that he was still continuing to fast. "Well, clear this out now," said the overseer, and they buried the hunger at straw and all. Into the cage they put a young panther. Even the most insensitive felt it refreshing to see this wild creature leaping around the cage that had so long been dreary. The panther was all right.
And Julieta?
The food he liked was brought to him without hesitation by the attendants. He seemed not even to miss his freedom. His noble body, furnished almost to the bursting point with all that it needed, seemed to carry freedom around with it, too. Somewhere in his jaws it seemed to lurk and the joy of life streamed with such ardent passion from his throat that for the onlookers it was not easy to stand the shock of it. But they braced themselves, crowded around the cage, and did not even want to move away,
Do not ever.
ever.
Yeah. And Amp, can you repeat firm, though no longer proud?
Firm, no longer proud.
Firm, though no longer proud.
Firm, though no longer proud.
And then persuasion.
Persuasion.
Good. Okay. Any questions here, guys?
Ardent passion.
It's ardent is like burning. So an ardent passion is like a burning desire or a burning passion. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, so this is Kafka. It's like super Kafkaesque. It's, I mean, totally just dark and horrible. Yeah. Hopefully you guys like the story. I don't want to talk about it too much. Yeah, it's definitely a good one. But yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys soon. I've got another class in an hour, I think. But thanks for coming in. Hopefully, like I said, you enjoyed it.